That's the battlefield news, but what's happening diplomatically? Russia has banged on alternate blocs to deter Western sanctions. Chief among them, BRICS. That's a bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. What's their goal? To create an alternative to the Western-led financial order. The BRICS countries set up a bank in 2015. It's called the NDB, or the New Development Bank. There are 9 members so far, but reports say a 10th could soon be added. And it's a heavy weight, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Some background first. The BRICS Bank lends mostly to developing economies. They have given out loans worth $32 billion for 90 plus projects. Beyond BRICS nations, it has 3 members, the UAE, Bangladesh and Egypt. But right now, the bank is facing a funding crisis. Russia owns around 19% stake in the bank, plus around 6.7% in total assets. After Western sanctions, BRICS Bank has been forced to freeze Russian exposure. The result? There's a shortage of funds. That's where Saudi Arabia comes into the picture. It is the world's 2nd largest oil producer, which means funds are not a problem. In addition, they also bring clout in West Asia. The BRICS Bank's annual summit is underway. Here's what they told the Financial Times. In the Middle East, we attach great importance to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and are currently engaged in a qualified dialogue with them. So talks are underway, and this is part of Riyadh's broader engagement with BRICS. They want to join the bloc. Saudi Arabia's membership is expected to be taken up during the summit in August this year. If all members agree, BRICS could have a new member. Does mess up the acronym though. Anyway, what does Saudi Arabia bring to the table? Deep pockets, influence in West Asia and a lot of oil. That last one is especially important. BRICS countries have been pushing for a common currency, a BRICS currency, one they could use to trade with each other. If Saudi Arabia agrees to sell oil in BRICS currency, it would be a big boost. Even bigger if they peg oil to the BRICS currency instead of the dollar. But that's all in the future. Right now, let's focus on the BRICS summit. It is scheduled for August and South Africa will be hosting it. Just one problem though. South Africa is a member of the ICC, or the International Criminal Court. Last year, the ICC issued a warrant for Vladimir Putin's arrest. What does that mean? It means South Africa is legally bound to arrest Putin if he steps foot in the country. So how will he attend the summit? Well, the government has found a loophole. They have granted diplomatic immunity to all summit attendees, the foreign ministers who will meet this week and the heads of state who meet in August. South Africa says this is routine, that their national law offers immunity to all attendees of global conferences. But still, one question remains. Can South Africa use national laws to override international statutes? That's for legal hawks to decide. Let's focus on the politics. The US and West invested a lot in South Africa. I mean diplomatically, not financially. They saw a stable and strategic partner in South Africa, perhaps a continental leader. But they underestimated South Africa's strategic autonomy. The country has been neutral in the ongoing war and sometimes more than neutral. In February, they held joint drills with Russia and China. Remember, this is in the middle of the Ukraine war. Then earlier this month, South Africa's army chief visited Moscow. That was breaking point for the US. They accused South Africa of selling weapons to Russia. President Cyril Ramaphosa called the accusation disappointing. And now you have this diplomatic immunity. South Africa is going above and beyond to host Putin. What does that tell you? The West's effort to isolate Russia has not succeeded. Russia is still a trusted partner in many countries. This week, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in Kenya. He will now fly down to South Africa. It shows the limits of Western sanctions and power plays. And where does that leave India? Caught in the middle, I guess. India's interest in the BRICS is based on the economic potential. The bloc makes up 25% of the global GDP, also 40% of the global population. India can use the BRICS to reshape the global economy, to build bridges to the global south. But here's the problem. India can't let BRICS become explicitly anti-US, at least not politically. That will be the challenge for India in BRICS. much like the challenge in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We'll be tracking this week's summit very closely. Now let's shift our focus to the Balkans. Ethnic tensions have been escalating in Kosovo since last Thursday. Tensions between ethnic Serbs and Albanians in the region. They have erupted into clashes between the Serbs and NATO peacekeeping forces. At least 25 members of NATO's Kosovo force, or KFOR, have been injured. The troops who were wounded are mostly from Italy and Hungary. Some of them have sustained serious injuries. The clashes are taking place in the northern parts of Kosovo. Some northern towns are mostly populated by ethnic Serbs. They have refused to accept Kosovo's 2008 Declaration of Independence. They still consider Serbia's Belgrade their capital. Meanwhile, Serbia's President Alexander Vucic is upping the ante. He says that 52 ethnic Serbs were hurt in the recent clashes. Vucic has put the Serbian army on the highest level of combat alert. It has sent alarm bells ringing. The EU and NATO are urging a de-escalation. No one wants a repeat of the ethnic violence of the late 1990s. Here's a report.
These were the scenes outside government offices in northern Kosovo yesterday. In 4 villages in the region, Leposavic, Zubin Potok, Mitrovica and Zvekan. The people clashing with the troops are ethnic Serbs. They form the majority of the population in the 4 communes. They're clashing with NATO peacekeepers. The force is called KFOR. At least 25 peacekeepers have been injured. The protesting villagers threw stones and other hard objects at them. This was after the troops forcefully tried to clear the Serbs using tear gas and stun grenades. They were trying to make way for Kosovo's special police forces. Serbia has not taken kindly to their actions.
I don't have any nice words to say about our partners in the European Union, about our partners within Kosovo Force. Their reaction was late. They should have been there on Friday, the way they are there today. Their mandate is to protect peace and stability, and before all, to protect people. Today they are not protecting people, they are not protecting democracy, they are not protecting institutions. But we have to continue to preserve peace.
The latest confrontation started last week. On Thursday, new mayors were sworn in at all 4 Serbian towns. The mayors were all ethnic Albanians. They won because the local Serbs had boycotted the mayoral elections last month. The 4 mayors won with a less than 3.5% voter turnout. They obviously don't represent the local electorate. But Kosovo wants them to take up their posts anyway. They were under orders from Kosovo's capital, Pristina, to physically go to the municipal offices. This is what has led to the escalation in tensions.
We have 2 requests, that illegal, illegitimate sheriffs, the way they call themselves, the newly elected mayors, go to their homes and boss around their relatives, their wives, kids, and other relatives, and that all of the special forces that are currently in the town hall and around the town hall pull out towards the south with all the vehicles, because this is not a police station. This is the people's town hall, city hall, that should serve people.
The local Serbs want the new mayors and Kosovo's special police forces out. The standoff is heating up. And it isn't limited to Kosovo. There's been saber rattling from Serbia's President Alexander Vucic.
We deployed our forces in accordance with the situation at places where we think it is necessary. We will visit many places with our army. We will not allow the pogrom of the Serbian people. For the last time, I will reiterate my appeal that the international community take action to bring Albin Kurti to his senses, to reason with him without resorting to pointless press releases on one hand while endorsing him with everything on the other.
Vucic has put the blame squarely on Kosovo's Prime Minister, Albin Kurti. This time, the US and EU have rebuked Pristina as well, for insisting that the Albanian mayors go to the town halls in the Serb villages. They want the mayors to work remotely till tensions subside. Kuti tweeted this after talking to the Western nations. He mentioned citizens of all ethnicities. It seems like an olive branch. Because no one can let the violence of the late 1990s return. Kosovo is a majority Albanian region. A separatist movement began in 1998. The Serbian government countered it with a violent crackdown. Over 13,000 people were killed, over 1 million displaced. Kosovo declared independence in 2008. Serbia has not recognized it. Neither have a host of countries like Russia, India and China. However, the US and several European nations have backed Kosovo's independence. As the tensions flare up, the world now needs to put aside these differences. Because the last thing we need is another war erupting.
Speaking of China, all's not going well with the Chinese economy. This year, China's economy was supposed to rebound, but the Communist Party's plans are not working. New problems keep coming up. The latest one is unemployment. It has touched record highs. I have some numbers. Joblessness among youth has hit a record, 20.4%. This was in April. That number is 4 times higher than China's national unemployment rate. It was around 5.5% last month. Unemployment in urban China is over 20%. These are alarming numbers. Do you know what they mean? About a fifth of China's urban youth is unemployed. Millions more are expected to graduate this year. They will enter the job market. The future for these workers looks uncertain. Either they'll be forced to take up low-paying jobs or they'll remain unemployed. Already the market for job seekers is crowded. I have more numbers to share with you. There are 96 million young workers in China's urban labor force. Out of this, 6 million are unemployed. Once more students graduate, they'll be entering the same market. So expect these numbers to go up. This is a serious problem for the Communist Party. It hails economic prosperity as one of its greatest achievements. Now that same prosperity is under threat. Reviving the Chinese economy is no easy task. For decades, China enjoyed a period of rapid growth. That era is now over. There are clear structural problems to deal with. The property boom is over. There is now an oversupply of apartments. As of February, about 4 million homes were unsold. Local governments have been crippled by debt. Do you know how much money they owe? At least $9 trillion. Some provinces are showing signs of distress. They are extending repayment deadlines to avoid default. Some are even calling out defaulters openly. The city of Wuhan is naming and shaming them in hopes to recover some money. We had told you about this yesterday. Chinese households are worried about the future, so they are hoarding cash. Earlier this year, a report came out in China. Household savings rate touched new highs. Last year, it was at 33%. So what does that mean? Chinese households are saving a large chunk of their income, not because the bank is giving great interest rates, but because they are afraid. They are worried about the economy. They fear they might need to dip into their savings, so they are saving more. All this is bad news for the Communist Party. There is unemployment, consumption is low, spending is down, and the market sentiment is negative. All this threatens China's internal stability. China is quite paranoid about this. It sees any form of protest or dissent as a direct challenge to its authority. That's why it crushes any protest swiftly. The legitimacy of the Communist Party's rule is reinforced by economic growth and prosperity. So any distress could fuel a resistance. Already, there is evidence of public anger. Look at these pictures. They're from the Yunnan province. The men in black is Chinese law enforcement. They show up in riot gear. But why? Well, the locals were protesting. Chinese authorities wanted to demolish a mosque. They faced stiff resistance. The locals tried to stop the demolition. This led to clashes. Such protests are rare in China. but they are a sign. Not all's well in Xi Jinping's China. The Korean conflict is entering space. North Korea is all set to launch a spy satellite. At least that's what they claim. The launch is slated for next month. It could happen between May 31st and June 11. North Korea has notified Japan of the launch. They say it could affect the waters near the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea. Japan has put its missile defense on alert. The plan is to shoot down any projectile that enters Japanese territory. This announcement raises a couple of questions. Why does Pyongyang need a spy satellite? Does it have such technologies? And why is the US and South Korea worried? Kim Jong-un has a long wish list of weapons, like nuclear submarines and intercontinental missiles. A spy satellite was also part of that list. But here's how Pyongyang is justifying it. A spy satellite would help North Korea identify US warplanes and deployments. It would improve the accuracy of any military strike. That's the official explanation. But is North Korea capable of building something like that? They have launched 2 Earth observation satellites before, one in 2012 and again one in 2016. Neither has sent any pictures back to Earth. Is this spy satellite any different? Experts say it's unlikely. North Korea's state media has released a picture of the so-called spy device. Experts say it's too small to relay high-quality pictures. Why then is Pyongyang bothering to launch it? To test the technology. You see, satellite launchers share a lot in common with long-range missiles. The core technology is same. So launching spy satellites could be an excuse. The real reason could be testing out ballistic missile technology, which, by the way, is illegal. The UN Security Council has banned North Korea from using ballistic technology. So if this launch goes ahead, there will be sanctions, or rather, more sanctions. Japan and South Korea have criticized Pyongyang's plan. They're calling it a serious provocation. So why is Kim Jong-un provoking, and why now? Just last week, the US and South Korea conducted live fire drills near North Korea. 4 more drills are planned. Both countries are marking 70 years of their alliance, so naturally, Kim Jong-un is angry. He usually escalates when there is a joint drill. But this time, he's got more reasons. South Korea also launched its first commercial-grade satellite last week. The hope is to build and deploy a spy satellite by late 2023. This would give South Korea an edge. So maybe Kim Jong-un is thinking ahead. Maybe he wants to keep the military status quo. But to do that, he will also need outside help. Kim's biggest ally is China. They have refused to comment on the planned launch. Instead, they called for meaningful dialogue. Where does that leave the Korean peninsula? More volatile than before. Kim Jong-un has carried out 100 missile tests since 2022. In the past, such tests indicated a willingness to talk. It was Kim's way of saying, come to the table. But this time, the dynamics are different. The Ukraine war will be playing on his mind. In the 1990s, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, and look what happened to them. So getting Kim to give up his nukes will be harder than ever. Plus, how interested is the US? Biden has taken a harsher stance than Donald Trump. So no summits and love letters. In fact, last month he sent a stern warning. Biden said a nuclear attack by North Korea would end the Kim dynasty. He also signed a new security declaration with Seoul. So the dynamics in Korea have changed. South Korea is more assertive now. It has launched a satellite. It is talking about becoming the world's #1 arms manufacturer. All this would have unsettled Kim Jong-un. Hence, the satellite launch. Now, there's something else that's making headlines in Japan. Turns out Tokyo has its own Partygate scandal. It involves Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's son, Shotaro. He was serving as one of the Prime Minister's advisors. But now, Kishida has succumbed to public pressure and sacked his son. Why? Well, Kishida's heir apparent held a private party last December. This was at the PM's official residence. And new photos from the party have emerged. Shotaro Kishida and his guests are seen being inappropriate. Not in the way you'd expect, though. They were seen posing at a symbolically important place. Yes, that's it. Not exactly what most of us would consider a scandal. But in Japan, it caused an outrage. And It led to the Prime Minister having to fire his political heir. Here's more. This is Shotaro Kishida, eldest son of Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and his Executive Policy Secretary. But that's set to end this Thursday. Kishida Jr. has got the sack. He's being forced to step down. No, it's not because of the obvious nepotism, but because of a party. Shotaro is facing the music for partying last December at the Prime Minister's official residence. The scandal is about a Bonenkai, or Forget the Year party, on 30th December. A lot of relatives were invited, and pictures from the gathering have been made public. Shotaro and his relatives were photographed posing on the red carpeted stairs at the PM's residence, with Kishida Jr. standing at the center. A place of honor reserved for the Prime Minister. It has drawn a stream of criticism. Now, this may not seem like much to a lot of people around the world. However, it's a big deal in Japan. The stairs at the PM residence hold a symbolic value. You see, the Prime Minister's residence is a 100-year-old building. It used to serve as the PM's office till 2005. That's when a new office was built and the old building was turned into the PM's living quarters. So the building and the iconic stairs are looked upon with deep respect. Shotaro Kishida posing there is seen as extremely disrespectful. Then there were other pictures. The partygoers were also seen standing at a podium, as if holding a news conference. All of this has outraged the Japanese people. And their ire was directed at Fumio Kishida. The Prime Minister is facing flack for his son's actions. His popularity is tanking once again. Kishida has been facing heat continuously during his tenure. A lot of it came after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The assassin killed Abe over his links to Japan's controversial Unification Church. It brought scrutiny to the ruling party's links with the organization. Those ties caused Kishida's popularity to tank, but he was overcoming that. In fact, Kishida saw a boost in ratings recently. This was after the recent G7 summit in Hiroshima. Kishida was finally being seen as a true statesman. But then, this Bonenkai party picture debacle happened. Kishida has no choice but to oust his son from his position. So far, he had kept Shotaro in office despite the optics. He began working for his father in 2020. After all, it's common in Japan to groom one's heir on the job. It's especially common in Japanese politics. You have numerous examples of dynastic politics in the country, like former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He was the grandson of former Prime Minister Nobusuke Kishi, so the nepotism wasn't too unusual. But Shotaro keeps courting controversy, from using embassy cars for private sightseeing trips to shopping for luxury souvenirs for cabinet members. The Japanese Prime Minister tried to sweep it all under the carpet. But the party photographs were too much for Kishida to ignore. Shotaro is now getting the boot for his inappropriate behavior. Kishida has now said, and I quote, "His behavior at a public space was inappropriate as someone who is in an official position. As political aide, I've decided to replace him for accountability." It's a blow for the Japanese Prime Minister, but it could be a victory in the fight against nepotism in politics. Our last story tonight is about a Russian spy, or at least one suspected to be a spy. Russian spies have been feared for decades now. Books have been written and movies made about them. The KGB, which is Russia's intelligence agency, became a global sensation during the Cold War. It ran a sophisticated network of spies across nations. People began admiring the agency and its spies, simply because it gave the best intel agencies of the world a run for their money. And while the Cold War is far behind us, the fear of Russian spies lingers on, which is why the appearance of a whale off the coast of Sweden has sparked fears within NATO. Their latest fear is this: has Russia unleashed whale spies on its enemies? That's right, this alleged spy isn't human. It's a friendly, playful, innocent mammal that lurks in the waters. But Russia's rivals believe there's something fishy about the whale. Our next report tells you why.
This is a beluga whale, a calm, playful and innocent creature. It's called Volodymyr. Why the peculiar name, you ask? Well, it's a pun, a satirical take on the whale's job, which is to spy on Russia's enemies. The Norwegians nicknamed the whale Volodymyr to highlight the mammal's association with Russia and its president Vladimir Putin. The Russian spy whale first made an appearance in 2019. It was believed to have been an agent of the Russian Navy, lurking in the waters of the region to collect information against NATO countries. Now, Volodymyr has made a comeback. On Sunday, the whale appeared here, off Sweden's southwestern coast. The whale has been speedily traveling for the past couple of months. Experts believe hormones are driving the whale. Remember, this is a 13 to 14-year-old whale whose hormones are peaking. Experts say Volodymyr seems to be on the lookout for a partner to mate with. Sebastian Strand, a marine biologist with the One Whale organization, said this: "It could be hormones driving him to find a mate, or it could be loneliness, as belugas are a very social species. It could be that he's searching for other beluga whales." But now let's answer the all-important question: why is this whale considered a Russian spy? It's because when Volodymyr was first discovered in 2019 off the coast in Norway, it was wearing a harness that had camera mounts, essentially making it capable of filming underwater. And do you know what was written on the harness? Equipment St. Petersburg. And that was enough evidence for European countries to believe that the whale was up to no good. For context, St. Petersburg is an important city in Russia. So the poor whale became a victim of the classic guilty by association mindset. But the fears of NATO aren't all too exaggerated either. You see, researchers say the whale has clearly been trained. It approaches boats, raises its head above water, and finally opens its mouth, expecting treats for amusing the onlookers. Norway is particularly concerned. It has issued an advisory. It has asked its citizens to steer clear of the whale and not interact with it. Then there's also Russia's supposed history of training whales to be spies. That's what really bothers Moscow's rivals. Russia has been training marine mammals since the Cold War. But Russia isn't alone. In 2014, Ukraine accused Russia of stealing its military dolphins. Ukraine has been training and deploying dolphins for military operations for years now. It even had a center for training the mammals to perform daring operations. But when it comes to the beluga whales, Russia seems to have a soft spot. Why? Because these whales can perform a variety of jobs, like protecting naval bases, detecting mines and torpedoes, and even assisting naval divers. And there's a history of Russia using these mammals for military purposes, which is why Europe is convinced that Volodymyr is a Russian spy, one that needs to be avoided at all costs.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.